everybody, and welcome. We're so excited. We're seeing everybody come in the chat. I want to introduce you to Shawn Strachan, who's going to lead today's webinar on getting the most out of reading.
Hello to all my fellow educators from all around the world. It's so fun to see you guys pop on and to read all the different places that you're coming to us from. My name is Shawn Strachan. I have the spelling there. And I am coming, this is kind of what's on the agenda for today. I'm going to give you a little bit about myself, but really we're going to be talking about how you can get the most out of using ReadTheory. And then we'll have some time for some Q&A. But a little bit about my background is that I am, first of all, coming to you from Texas and in the north central part of Texas. So hello to all my fellow Texans out there. I've been an educator for 20 plus years. I don't like to be specific anymore about how long I've been in education, but I have taught in all different realms. I've taught as an elective teacher for Spanish. I've taught all levels of English from 6th all the way to high school English. And I'm now currently an ESL Specialist in Prosper ISD, which is one of the largest growing school districts in the entire United States right now. My background is that I have taught all levels of students as far as their needs, as far as regular classes, honors classes. I've also taught sheltered ESL classes. So my background really is in language acquisition. And so that's really the lens that I'm going to be showing you on how I use ReadTheory. But I also think it's important for you to know that in my current position, I'm in general education classrooms all the time working as a co-teacher. So I have a very unique perspective, and that I'm going to be talking about how I use this specifically with my students who are language learners, but also how I see it used with teachers in the regular education classroom. And I do share my lens and my perspective because at least here in the United States, according to the National Education Association, about 25% of all of our students will be language learners by the year 2025. And for my school district, I can say that we are feeling that right now. And we have to be creative as educators about finding resources to meet the needs of all students. And that's really what I love most about ReadTheory, is that in one classroom, it can meet the needs of my struggling readers, it can meet the needs of my language learners, but it can also challenge my students who need a little more challenge with their reading skills. I am going to show you a very short video on what ReadTheory really is, because if you've been using ReadTheory, then you already have a background knowledge of how awesome the program is. I honestly think that the only educators who are not using ReadTheory are the ones who just haven't seen it yet, because I think that's how amazing it is. So this is just a short video, just so maybe my new educator friends on here, if you're new to ReadTheory, I want to give you a little bit of background on how you can get started with it and what it is. And then I'm going to dive deeper into how I use it and how I see it used in the classroom.
Because ReadTheory is an automatic and adaptive reading comprehension program, all that's left on the teacher's side is to have your students log in and start working. You don't need to assign anything. You can have your students create their own accounts and use your class code to connect with you. They'll enter the class code when they sign up or later on the My Teachers page within their accounts. Otherwise, you can create their accounts manually. If you need help manually creating student accounts, head to the suggested video link above. Once your students log in, ReadTheory takes care of the rest. Our program uses AI to assign reading comprehension tasks that are perfectly suited for their ability level. When they first log in, they'll take a brief pretest and then be given their first regular leveled passage. They'll continually be assigned new passages at various levels of difficulty based on their performance. Back on the teacher side, once your students have completed both the pre-assessment and their first passage, data will begin to appear on the progress report page within your teacher account. You can view the whole class or individual data on this screen. You can use this data to inform your classroom decisions, and to plan remediation or enrichment activities for your students. And that's it. Each time your students log in, ReadTheory will have a new passage waiting for them.
So that's kind of ReadTheory in a very small nutshell. It is a leveled reading program that's going to challenge your students based on the level that they begin. So that pretest is incredibly important. So I have three kind of concepts that I'm going to share with you today that I believe are very powerful and truly getting the most out of ReadTheory. And the first one is to set a goal and to celebrate progress. And the second one is to always provide a focus for reading. I'm going to talk about what that can look like in your classroom. And third, to sit down and read with your students and to have them read to you. Now, I know for my elementary friends out there, you're like, what? We do this already. But I'm going to kind of show you maybe from all of the levels, first grade all the way up through 12th grade, what that can look like in regards to ReadTheory. So the really awesome thing about ReadTheory is that every student begins this program by taking a pre-test. And on the teacher end, you can set up how you want that data to be displayed. And what I mean by that is you will see the students like entry level into the program, and you can see that as a grade level, or you can see it as their Lexile level. You can also make this visible to the students. So when the students take their pre-test, they're going to see that, maybe they're a 5th grade student and they're starting at a 3rd grade level. They will be able to see that information. Or you might have it set on your end as the teacher that you only want your students to see the Lexile level indicator. And that's okay. You can make that decision as a teacher. But the most important thing, however your students see it, you always want to begin with where are we starting? And then you want to set a goal. And let me move this. I'm showing you on this screen. This is some of my, a previous student of mine. And this student spent a lot of time in ReadTheory. And what we did was after they took their very first pre-test, we looked at, what is your reading level right now? And then we set a goal for, okay, in 6 weeks, we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about where you've come from. Like, where are you now after 6 weeks? And then at that 6-week check mark, we look at the Lexile level or the grade level, and we set another goal. And then so every 6 to 9 weeks, we're looking at, or have we met our goal yet? And I think this is so incredibly powerful because not only can you see it as the teacher, but the students get to see it too. So it becomes a challenge for many, especially for my middle grade students, 6th, 7th, and 8th. I've had so many students, they set a challenge for themselves, and they want to do ReadTheory every day because they want to see that little indicator mark. They want to see it move up on the scale. And you can see this student's progress was pretty impressive. They started at a 480 Lexile, and this was about 1 semester. By 1 semester, they were up to about a 900 Lexile consistently. And this student was extremely motivated. They really, really wanted to read that reading or raise that reading level. Another view that you can see from the teacher end is you can see the grade level progress. Now, I did make a note on here that for my older students, I generally will turn the grade level off and just let them see their Lexile level. And this is something that when we're setting those goals, I've got my notebook over here, we write it down in our notebook. So they are writing down their goal, whether it's their grade level or their Lexile level. So I am having every individual student write down their individual goal, because you may have some students in your class, let's say you're teaching, we'll say 7th grade, that's kind of in the middle. You're teaching a 7th grade English class, and you may have some students who are at a 8th grade level and they need to push up to a 9th grade level. You may have some students who are starting at a 4th grade level. So every single student needs to set their own personal goals. Now, with my language learners, I will say that I also turn off the grade level progress. I want them to just see Lexile, because I know they're learning the language for the first time. And I don't want them to feel demoralized or to feel like they don't know something just because they might be starting out at a lower grade level. I would also like to make a note here to let you know that for my language learners who are coming to me from many of the countries that some of you are joining us from today, if they are a newcomer and they have very little English acquisition at the moment, then I do allow them to use a translated version of ReadTheory, which is another reason why, honestly, I can't say enough great things about it. We use the Google Translate extension. And for my brand new newcomers, I want to know what English skills do they have, not necessarily English skills, excuse me. I want to know what reading skills do they already have in their native language. And if you have no other screener for this, then ReadTheory can kind of serve that purpose. So I do let them translate it into their native language. We also talk about how translations aren't the best and they might have to make some good guesses with the translation, but I do let them translate into their native language and take the ReadTheory evaluation in their native language. This helps me see if I have a newcomer coming into the 6th grade and in their language they score a 6th grade level or a high Lexile level, then I know they have the skills. I just need to help with the language acquisition. But if they're coming to me in 6th grade and they score at a 1st grade level in their native language, then that helps me see I have some more gaps that I need to fill in more than just language acquisition. So I do allow my students to take this pre-test in their native language the first time. I talked about setting a goal and then celebrating progress. I love the fact that I can from the teacher end, I can see the progress of the class as a whole and each individual student as well. And I can sit down next to a student, they can open up their progress and we can talk about it together. But I have a picture up here. This is from a teacher on my campus. And she has this in her classroom. It's called her WOW board. And as students progress through ReadTheory, ReadTheory really does promote stamina and it promotes students making progress more so than perfection. So when students move from one level to another level, or when they've spent a certain number of minutes or a certain amount of time in the program, it gives them like these badges, these like little awards. And in this teacher's classroom, every time they move from one level, or every time they get a badge, every time they get an award from ReadTheory, they get to go up and sign the WOW board, and they get like a little star by their name. And after they accumulate, a certain number of stars, they get a piece of candy or, some type of tangible reward. Or sometimes they get 5 minutes of free time or whatever it is what you want to be. But I think it's so incredibly important that you celebrate that progress with them. And that doesn't have to be that they, maybe they didn't meet their Lexile level goal or their grade level goal. But we still want to celebrate the fact that they're putting in the hard work, they're putting in the time, and they're trying. So I love that ReadTheory really does promote stamina and it celebrates the progress. I also think it's important that you understand that ReadTheory can be a standalone program. It is meant to supplement what you're already doing in the classroom. But I think that you're going to get the most out of ReadTheory if prior to having your students work in the platform, that you provide them a focus for that moment, a focus for that day. And this is what I mean by that. This is an example of what I did. I taught summer school this summer, and this is what I did in my class. We use ReadTheory every single day, but we would talk about is the piece of literature you're reading, is it fiction or nonfiction? And if it's fiction, then for today, I want you to focus on characters. If it's nonfiction, I want you to focus on the information that you find, the names and numbers. So I'm giving them a specific focus. Your specific focus may be whatever you're working on in class that day, depending on your grade level. If you're working on, subject-verb agreement, then just have your students go into ReadTheory knowing that they're going to pay attention to subject-verb agreement. I think this is also a great place to bring out their journal or their notebook. Every time that they notice something about a character, write it down. If they find a number or a repeated fact, write it down. But I think if you have your students go into the program with a specific focus, then they are more likely, in my experience, what I've seen with my students at least, to be more careful about their reading. They're more focused with what they're reading, because now they're not just reading without a purpose, reading to answer questions. They're reading with the purpose of, I'm looking for the setting, or reading with the purpose of, I'm trying to find repeated numbers or repeated names. I also have my students, after we read, they have to go back into their journal and they have to write about what they read. So if it was fiction, they have to tell me a short summary of what they read. If it was nonfiction, they have to write a sentence telling me the information that they found. Okay, we're going to talk about this. Reading with your students. I know if I have my elementary educator friends out there, I know you're like, this is just what you do, right? You have reading centers, you have small group time. However, I will say that in my experience in the secondary world, unfortunately, that tends to kind of go away. And secondary friends, I get it, because many times you've got 32 kids in your classroom, or some of you probably more than that. And it can be a little bit of a challenge. So I'm going to give you some ideas on maybe how you can make this work. But this is where I have seen the most growth from my students. And that's what we want with reading. We want to see growth and we want to see progress. So when I say read with your students, I have this here because I know my secondary friends are probably like, what? I really do sit down next to each individual student in my class and in the classes where I'm in, and make one student at a time read to me, read with me, and listen to me read to them. And these are for secondary students. Some of these are, 13, 14, 15-year-old kids, and I'm making them read out loud, and I'm making them listen to me read out loud. I know my elementary friends are like, of course, that's what you're supposed to do. I have an example of up here. So for my elementary friends out there, you probably have rotations, or you have your small groups or your stations already, your centers. I think that's what the elementary world calls it. For a secondary, this is how I organize my classroom and how many of the teachers whose classes I push into. This is how we kind of work together to be able to get to every single kid in the class. It doesn't happen in one day. It takes a little while. That's one of the reasons why we set those goals for 6 weeks or 9 weeks, because it might take me that long to get to each kid a couple of times. I like having stations, and for really to get the most out of ReadTheory, to get the best amount of data, I highly recommend you do it at least once a week. I think more often is going to be more beneficial, but I would say you at least want to be in the program once a week so that those students are having enough time in the program to get really all the benefits they need from it. So you could do stations. I had separate stations, and my students, I prefer for them to literally, I have a 15-minute timer set up here on this slide, but when their time at that station is up, they physically get up and they walk to the next station. I personally think that physical movement is important. But what this could look like is I would be working with my students maybe at a writing station, and I'm going to get them started on a writing assignment. And then I'm going to move over to the reading station, and I'm going to pick one child a day, and I'm going to sit right next to them, and I'm going to make them, the first thing they have to do is they have to read to me. So now, while that's happening, because I'm sitting next to one kid, and I know some of you are thinking, okay, what about the other 30 kids? Is it like anarchy happening in the classroom? You have to be creative, and you are, I know, about how you put those groups together and what you're having them do when they're in those stations. So if you are one teacher in your classroom and you're having to juggle multiple things happening at the same time, then you're just going to have to be really creative about who you put together in a group and what those groups are doing. You will see up here that I have a game review station. I did that intentionally because that's at least one thing. I love the game programs like GimKit and Blookit, Kahoot. things where students can still get review, but they can do it independently. What I also like about this is generally that game review station, they're making some noise. So there's a little bit of noise happening in the classroom, and I'm okay with that because I'm sitting next to a student and I'm going to make them read to me. And so I want there to be some background noise so that they don't feel like everyone's listening to them. And your stations, I have 15 minutes up here, but really it just depends on the length of your class. We had 4 stations on this day. Sometimes we only had 3 stations. You might want to do more than that if it works in your classroom. So that's one way to consider, if you're secondary especially, to consider how you can set this up. Okay, now I've got my station set up. I've started my timer. I'm sitting next to my student. And at first, they really don't like me to do this. But the first thing I do, I sit next to them and I do not let them answer the questions. That's why that big X is there. And you know, if you teach, especially maybe you teach honors classes or GT classes, sometimes they just want to go straight to the question without reading the passage. And I think we all have different viewpoints on how to teach this. Yes, it is beneficial to read the questions first so that you know what you're looking for, but then you still want to go back and read the passage. And we know many times our students skip that part. They just jump straight to the questions. So one benefit of me sitting there is I'm like, no, we're not reading the questions first. We are going to read the passage first. I want to know what their reading skills are. Now, I know the next time I'm not sitting next to them, they might jump straight to the questions. But this time, I'm sitting next to them. I'm not letting them read the questions first. The first thing that I make them do is, you see there is a picture of a wombat, because that's what this story is about, wombats. I'm going to make my students that I'm sitting next to get out their journal, and we're going to talk about the picture that we see. And this is basically any structure that we see on the page. It could be a picture. If it's a poem, because that's the other thing I love about ReadTheory, it will give you different genres. So they might see a poem on the page. We are going to write about what we see. There's this great book called Talk, Read, Talk, Write. And I kind of do this in a rotation. Sometimes it's talk, write, talk, read, talk, read, talk, write. But I highly recommend that book and that strategy. So that's what we're going to do first. We're going to look at the picture. We're going to look at any graphic elements we see in that quiz, and we're going to write about it. I like to set a timer and make my students write for 1 minute. Like, write for 1 minute about what you see. And I mean, because honestly, I'm like, I don't know what a wombat is. And that's the other thing. If I don't know what it is, we need to look this word up. Like, we're not just going to skip over it. So as I'm sitting here by them, I'm also modeling good reading strategies. So we're going to go to Google and we're going to Google wombat and we're going to look for pictures. And especially with my language learners, this is a strategy that I want them to learn. You know, if you come across a word you don't know, and it seems to be an important word like the title, then let's look it up. That might be a word we want to translate. It's definitely a word we want to look at more pictures. We might be reading information about it if we need to, but I want to model really good reading strategies for all my students. So we're going to do a little bit of writing, and then I'm going to make them read what they wrote. Again, this is a very good strategy for your language learners. You're making them use their speaking skills. If they are a newcomer and they just can't read, maybe they don't have the skills yet to do the writing part. Or if you have a really, you are in a first grade classroom and maybe you've got struggling writers, then you write something and have you say it and have them repeat it. But let them see that the connection between you writing the words and you speaking the words. We haven't even read the story yet. Like, we're still just doing like the prep work for the story. Now, the reason I make my students read to me, and again, I know my elementary friends, you're like, yeah, that's exactly why you do this. But for our secondary, we kind of grow out of this, I feel like. So I make my students read to me because I want to know, are they a struggling reader or are they an excelling reader? Do they need my help or do they not need my help? And I want to listen to them read. I want to determine the two things on the screen. I want to know if they're struggling, number one, is it because of reading fluency or is it because of reading comprehension? So I'm going to make them read the passage to me. If it's really, really bumpy, and you know what I'm talking about, choppy reading, then we have a reading fluency problem. Now, ReadTheory in and of itself doesn't necessarily have like a phonics program built in to address this, but I will tell you, again, one of the reasons I love ReadTheory is that it does work with some audio features. So if I have, what I mean by that, if I have a reader who needs reading fluency intervention, okay, I know that they need intervention. I'm going to I'm thinking I'm going to need to schedule some tutoring. I'm going to have to get some different resources for this student. But guess what? They can still do ReadTheory. In our district, we have access to Google Read Write. It's installed on all of our students' Chromebooks, and they can use Google Read Write to read to them. That ReadTheory works really well with this program. And so they just click a button and they can have the entire passage read to them. And the great thing about Read Write, Google Read Write, is that it highlights each word. So we're making that word sound connection as the students are going through ReadTheory. It also means I don't need a separate program. I can still have every kid in my class doing the same program. But now all I've done is I've differentiated a little bit because now this student has headphones and they're listening to it. If I see that this student reads very fluently, they just are not processing what they're reading very well. Maybe they're reading it too fast. Then that's a different kind of technique that I know I need to focus on with that student. They may need more guidance on, looking at key details, or they may need to show me that they can go back into the text and find text evidence before they choose their answer. This student who can read, they can read fluently, but they have low reading comprehension. They just may need to have more direct instruction on good reading skills. But the phonics part, they have down. Okay, I'm in my classroom in this passing period, so there's if you're hearing sounds, that's probably what it is. So if I've determined that, again, if they have good reading fluency, but it's comprehension, then these are the two questions that I rely on. We've read the passage, and then we're going to go to the questions. And yes, I literally sit there the whole time, like they are ready to get rid of me. I make them read the whole thing to me, and then I make them read all the questions and the answer choices, and I make them prove to me that they had a good reason for choosing their answer. So I will use these two questions. Well, one question, one statement. Why did you choose that answer? If they don't know why they chose that answer, then I use the second one. Okay, you're going to have to show me where in the text did you find proof? Did you find evidence that this was a good answer? So again, I'm modeling those good reading skills while I'm sitting next to this one kid. I think more than anything, maybe what it does is it makes them, they know that the next time I'm sitting by them, they know they're going to have to go through this process again. And they also know that the more progress they make, the less likely or the less time I might spend while I'm sitting next to them. So it is kind of motivating for some of our students. If I have a student that just cannot read it and the audio is maybe not a good idea, or, if there's, especially for, I will say, my language learners, I would prefer for them to hear it from a native speaker. So for these students, I just kind of have to gauge it. Sometimes I'll let them listen to the computer audio, or I will read it for them. And for my language learners, as we're reading this, I know they're not going to understand every single word. So what I focus on with them is we're going to pick 3 words, and those are the words that you are going to focus on as we read. Every time you hear that word, you're going to raise your hand, or every time you hear that word, you're going to write it down. So I give them a specific focus as well, just depending on their comfort level, they might read it, I might read it, or I might have them listen to it through the computer audio. And I also know what you're thinking, like, so I've just spent 15, 20 minutes sitting next to one kid. What about the other 30 or 35 for many of you? This is not a fast process, not the way that I do this. But remember, this is all about progress over perfection. The most amazing thing about Read Theory is that it does build stamina for our students. And if you're going to take the time, which is what I highly recommend, give students a focus, make them read to you, make them show you that they understand, be a model for them. It is not going to be, it's not a magic fix all in a week kind of thing. But slow is okay, because we really want to focus on what progress are your students making. Okay, so that's really all of the information that I wanted to share with you today. I think it's incredibly important that you set a goal with your students after they take that pretest. Set a goal and then celebrate that progress. The teacher here has a great idea with her WOW board. Maybe it's a WOW board or some other creative ways that I'm sure you guys have on, really celebrating the progress that your students make. And then I highly, highly recommend that you provide a focus for your students while they're reading. Some great ideas are to use the talk, read, talk, write strategy. You might also use, there's some great books that that signpost, nonfiction signpost, and fiction signpost that you could use. And then the last thing, my principal is making announcements, I'm sorry. The last thing is for you to read with your students. Find a way to organize your classroom in such a way that you can have stations maybe, or if you're going to do this as whole class, that's awesome. Do it as whole class. Maybe you have weekly Read Theory days, or you use it as a warm-up for the first 10 minutes of class. You do Read Theory every day or every other day. But it is most valuable if you set aside specific intentional time and give your students enough time in the program so they'll get to see the progress. These are some books that I highly recommend. Notice a Note by Colleen Beers and Robert Probst. Those are the ones with the Notice a Note, Talk, Read, Talk, Write. And another one by Colleen Beers, What to Do when what teachers can do when kids can't read. And then as my language background, we love John Seidlitz's 7 Steps to a Language-Rich Interactive Classroom. Has a lot of really great strategies in it for language learners. And I think those strategies can be applied to Read Theory. Okay, so we have some time now for some Q&A. So I know that some questions have been going on in the chat. So if you guys have any questions, I love reading what some of you guys are saying, some of the strategies that you use. So I know that Read Theory, we've got several people from the Read Theory team that are answering your questions as well. I see one about how do you turn the grade level off. I think that's in the settings, in the teacher settings. And I also have to throw out a really, advocate really for, there's different levels of Read Theory. There's like basic and then there's premium. You do get a lot with basic, but I will tell you with the premium, you do get more like specific details as to like the specific things that your students are struggling with. So that is something to consider.
All right, we'll continue to monitor the chat if you have questions, but we will, feeling motivated, that's good, that's awesome, that's what we want. There's a question on the advertisements popping up on the basic program. Yes. So on the free program, we do have ads, but on the premium, we remove them. So that's one of the perks of premium. You will get a recording of the video, Sharon, good question, and a certificate of completion. About 2 hours after the webinar ends, there's an automated email that goes out. Shawn, this was incredible. This is amazing. I'm motivated now too. You can see all the engagement in the chat and the questions. I think you can do that. I'm going to place here your free premium trial link. So all of you who attended live, one of the things we like to do since you're on live with us is give you access to premium for 30 days. So that's this link here, premium trial.
I do see a question about if working with adult ELLs. I have not used ReadTheory with an adult group before. However, I honestly think it would be amazing. I think it has such amazing content, and because you get to see your level and your growth, you know, anyone can sign up to use it. It does not have to be monitored from a teacher account. So this is one of the programs that my district, we send home information about ReadTheory, and we advertise it for all of our language learners throughout the district. So we also promote it's there for the parents if they want to use it as well. But I've never intentionally used it with adults. Oh, someone responded on here that they use it with an adult ESL class. I think that's amazing.
Awesome. Cool. Yes, so about 2 hours after this, you will all get your continuing education credits. So look out for that. I'm going to also pop in the chat. We do have a case study on using ReadTheory with adult ELs. So I will pop that in here since it sounds like we have quite a few ESL teachers on. And let's see. Here it is. All right, and this is actually an LAUSD teacher. So for adult education. Number of students. Class. Thank you, Carly. All right. Thank you all. Thank you, Shawn. This was amazing. Thank you all for coming on. And I hope you all have a great start to the school year. See you.
Thank you.